Benefits would be the opportunity to have your time and your life back to, for kids. Basically, we create a space where kids are able to figure out what they're interested and passionate about through exploration, through trying things out, through learning through their passions. So we create an opportunity for kids to get, over the course of their time, of their years in an ALC, to get really clear about who they are, what their gifts are, what their strengths are, what brings them joy, and to practice creating what they want for themselves in their lives and in their community and in collaboration with others, so that when they leave and they move on and they become young adults, that they have the ability to say, this is what I want to make happen in the world or in my life, and to deliver on that. So in a world where facts and knowledge can be looked up instantly on an internet device, it seems a little wasteful to spend hours and hours memorizing chunks of information to spit out onto a test and promptly forget. So instead of focusing on content and curriculum in an ALC, we're focusing more on the process of learning and self-creating and self-directing, so that students have the ability to do that for the rest of their lives, not just for a year or two after graduation. And I think the biggest part around that is the clarity that they gain around who they are and what they want. So they're not just going to college automatically because it's the thing to do, and they're not just kind of going through these institutional steps that lead them to a job that isn't super fulfilling. So yeah, it's a whole other way of approaching education, but it's one that's increasingly more relevant and certainly more humane.
And yeah, most adults who have happy, fulfilled lives tend to have a lot of autonomy in their lives. They're not playing the I'll be happy when game. They actually know how to create their own incredible realities in their lives each day, and to assess the present moment and what's happening in the world right now. Many kids in schools end up playing the I'll be happy when game, or you're always chasing this carrot, like you've got to study for the test that's on Friday. You have to do this because next year you'll be in middle school and you'll have to it'll be hard in middle school, or when you graduate, then you have to prepare for college, or then you're preparing for something else, and you're never actually just in the moment and being happy or being fulfilled or knowing what's interesting to you. And the kids in our schools actually get practice in having an empowered life, which tends to lead to happier, more fulfilled lives. And in general, most parents that I speak to want their kids to be happy and fulfilled, so why not let them practice having that now?
Well, I think there's actually an incredible amount of people out there who are doing things different, and the first step is kind of just taking a step back and recognizing that there are lots of different groups and subcultures and paths to doing this. And if you do a very basic amount of research, you can quickly start finding a different tribe to run in and a different group of people who have a different approach, a different feeling about education and how that should work. So definitely, look for places where you can find others who are doing things that don't make you feel so like outside of the box, because there's a lot of places where it's not so much the case. But also, I think just having some introspection and remembering what it was like for you in school, remembering the things that didn't really make sense and the things that you overcame but weren't really helpful. I think we have this idea that we grow up and this part was stupid and this part was inefficient and this part was hard and this part was irrelevant, but we have to kind of do the same. Our kids have to go through the same struggle, and it's almost like this rite of passage to go through this struggle, but it doesn't actually have to be the case. And so recognizing that we don't have to do the same things to our kids that we experienced, and seeking out other people who are looking for a different way of doing it as well.
Yeah, and I think that it's a very fear-based approach to think that you have, if you're telling yourself the story that you can damage your kid, then that's the story that you're going to live in too. You can also tell yourself a different story. Human beings are incredibly resilient. You know, I look to my own mother who escaped from Vietnam in 1980 and, you know, lived through war and stepped over dead bodies on the way to school, yet she's one of the happiest people you could ever meet. If you tell yourself you can damage this human being, then you can also just tell yourself something different.
Well, lots of different things. The things that went into informing the project and what we're trying to accomplish in the project had a lot to do with my experience working in alternative schools or schools that were focused on a different kind of approach to education and seeing what some of those models and approaches were doing well and where the gaps were and trying to fill those gaps, trying to bring those ideas into the 21st century. But kind of on like a bigger picture level, the reason I do the work is because I think sort of how I was, approaching the last question, we have this idea that kids need to be trained to become legitimate human beings. And I'm really interested in what's possible in our world on a large scale for each individual's joy and happiness and experience of life, and also for our communities and our global society, like what's possible if education wasn't this thing that we push on to kids and force them to do, but something that we called out of them and something that they generated. So looking at human beings as children as inherently valuable as they are, and just pure like truth and beauty, and not something that needs to be fixed and trained and bent and broken and molded, but something that's already there, that's perfect, and supporting them in creating the world rather than asking them to fit into the broken one that we have. So that's my biggest inspiration around it.
Yeah, after teaching in public schools in my third year, I ended up having to walk away because I felt like I was harming children more than helping children. I remember a lot in teaching math, and the fifth graders in my classroom didn't understand certain concepts that were presented that I knew were presented in the fourth grade curriculum. And I walked down to the fourth grade teacher and I was like, "Didn't you teach this stuff last year?" And she says to me, "Yeah, but that's what we do in a spiral curriculum. We know they're just going to forget it all, so we just reteach it again the next year." And I was like, wait, and everybody thinks this is okay and normal? So I realized that, knowledge does not equal understanding, especially in math. Doing some of my own research, I found just example after example of how teaching math to children, especially under age 10, causes more harm than good. And kids, when you just let them go, they naturally explore all literacy, numeration, everything on their own with much more understanding. And then when they have that base, they can learn things so quickly later on when they're older. So I just kind of felt like we're wasting their time, forcing them to be compliant and obedient, rather than being curious and just knowing who they are and building meaningful and deep connections and relationships with them. I also wasn't happy with how teachers, if you have a student in a classroom who is maybe disruptive or a behavior problem, you just deal with them for a year until you pass them on to another teacher. And I felt like that doesn't actually, bring honor to that person and what's going on with them. And when kids have other things happening in their lives, they can't learn if they're, hungry, or if they're having like a bad time with at home or anything like that. And I really wanted a space where I could just get to know kids over many, many years. After I ended up quitting the public school job, I ended up teaching in a private school for 3 years, and still found that I was a little more radical than what they were even doing. So I set out to read a lot of books and interview a lot of parents, and what I find is that most parents don't care about what knowledge is being shoved into their head. They just want their child to be respected. So I created a school where the adults in the space would actually respect children. Well, one of the most exciting things that I think we're doing is creating this teacher education or educator education program. When we do this ALF summer program, when I taught in a small alternative school before this one, I was one of 2 teachers in the school, and it got really lonely, and you don't have ideas to bounce up. You're not like generating new ideas from different types of people. So we created this summer program last year that's been really successful in creating a community of educators that are speaking the same language. You want to speak to that some more?
Yeah, I mean, just like parents out there who are feeling like school isn't working for my kid, but I don't know what to do next. I'm afraid to jump ship, and will I be swimming alone, or is there another boat for me? The same thing is there with people who try to start schools like this and who have the passion to do that, but you know, there's not a whole lot of people collaborating around that process and sharing knowledge, and there's a lot of people trying to reinvent the wheel over and over and over again there. So one thing we really set out to do with the ALC project was to create a community among the facilitators who are doing the work, as a way of sustaining those people who are doing the work, but also as a way of inviting more and more people into the project. And so really we hold a space for people to come in and create their own value in the project and make the project their own. We train ourselves by creating and embodying our own ALC for a full month in the summer. So our professional development isn't just learning, you know, like curriculum tricks. It's actually practicing being the self-generative, self-directed learners that we are asking our students to become, and modeling what it looks like to create the life that you want. And so that, you know, that's something that we're really excited about, is kind of this frontier of you know, training teachers and expanding the project for what it means to create and hold self-directed learning communities, because there really isn't a college program for that or a training program for that, because it's a whole other practice. So developing that.
Healthy culture creation is what we're doing. We're creating healthy cultures, and one thing that we fundamentally understand is that children learn more from the culture and environment that they're immersed in than from the content that they're taught. So we as adults have to actually embody and model that. So it does take work. You can't just take a teacher who's teaching in a public school and dump them into one of our schools.
You have to be doing the work on yourself.
Yeah, a lot.